What's up guys, Kudo-kun here. I know it's been a while, but I just wanted to hop on here because I managed to beat Persona Q2 right under the wire and I wanted to get a review out there for release day. If you're a Persona 5 fan and you haven't checked out the original Persona Q and you don't quite know what's going on, I'll explain it to you. Persona Q is a dungeon crawler, crossing over Persona 3 and Persona 4 characters. The gameplay's just like an Etrian Odyssey joint. You're going to be making some maps, you're going to be crossing some dungeons, and you're going to be listening to Persona 3 and Persona 4 characters talk to each other, which is pretty awesome. Now, with the second release of a Persona Q, we've got the characters from Persona 5 and also the main character of Persona 3 Portable to work with. Yes, you heard me right, ladies and gentlemen. Femtagonist is officially canon. Now, if you've never played an Etrian Odyssey game before and you don't quite know what you're getting into, essentially you'll be going through a first-person dungeon, creating your own map as you go. While making your own map sounds kind of tedious at first, it's actually one of the main selling points of the Etrian Odyssey series, and you might find that you'll like it more than you think you would at first. There are also some helpful tools that you can use to make it a lot easier. For example, you can go into the settings and have it set up so that whenever you go by a wall, it automatically marks the wall in your map so you don't have to draw it yourself, which I would recommend because the map drawing in this game is a lot more finicky than the Etrian Odyssey games. I don't quite know why the map drawing is so different in this game than it is in the other Etrian games, but for some reason, if you don't draw that exact line, it just doesn't give it to you on your map. So I myself had to turn on the feature that lets you just immediately fill in the walls because, man, I just didn't want to sit there just redrawing the lines over and over again just to get one wall to stick. It's just too much. The battle system, funnily enough, isn't that different than you'll find in a regular Persona game. It's just a little bit less flashy because you won't actually see your characters on screen until you initiate an attack. So each of your characters can attack either through using a regular attack or through a skill, and if you can land the correct skill on the correct character, you can stun them by hitting their weakness, and then if you stun everybody on the field, you can do an all-out attack and finish everybody off. Your main gameplay loop will be figuring out which characters are best for which dungeons, and then using them to get through the dungeon as smoothly as possible. While the gameplay really isn't that different from Persona Q1, I found it a bit more tedious this time around. They sort of boosted the stats on all the enemies. Granted, I only played through it on normal because I had to finish this in time to get the review out, but even on normal, the enemies are pretty much 1 to 2 shotting you, and you're not doing that much damage back to them. The gameplay very heavily relies on you taking advantage of the weakness system and being mindful of the fact that your enemies will also take advantage of the weakness system and stun you back. This works really well in theory, but I find that it really messes with the difficulty curve because when you first start out on a dungeon, you're going to be so underleveled. You're going to have to continuously go back to base and get your health and your mana back and everything. And when you go back into the dungeon, it's going to take a few tries to get through a floor. But then there's going to be a tiny amount of time where you're evenly matched with the enemy, and then you're just going to shoot past them like a rocket and just immediately be able to decimate everything in the dungeon with absolutely zero trouble. At that point, it just becomes about managing your resources, making sure you don't spend too much SP or take too much damage or have enough healing items on hand or whatnot. It's not a terrible battle system, but it does amaze me how quickly it goes from being tedious to being manageable to being so easy it's not even worth your time anymore. This problem doubles and triples itself when you get further into the game and start unlocking better personas with better AoE spells, because as soon as you've got all of the Ma spells, which is Ma Bufu, Ma Zio, Ma Garu, so on and so forth, and you can just spam those repeatedly and knock out everything on the board in a single turn, then the battles just aren't really going to be any more challenging from that point on. As soon as you've got every single element in their AoE form, you've essentially won the entire game, and at this point, the bosses are going to be the only thing that really give you a challenge. And I do want to stress that the bosses will give you a pretty hefty challenge. The game is broken up into 4 main sections, each representing a movie, as the theme this time is, of course, a movie theater, and you transport to different worlds by entering through different movies. The first of which being Kamoshida Land, which should trigger pretty much anybody who's played Persona 5. The idea here is each labyrinth takes a different movie, genre, or trope and turns it into an entire labyrinth. This time around, it's superhero movies, and the superhero, of course, is Kamoshida. It's funny in a cheesy way, but it's also it's weird. It's a little bit weird that they chose Kamoshida because I know it's the first dungeon of Persona 5, but I mean that was kind of a weird thing to go through, and I kind of wish they didn't choose it here for this lighthearted game. I mean, can we just acknowledge for a second that Kamoshida was a teacher who was molesting his students, and then he raped one of the students, and then they jumped off of a building in an attempt to kill themselves. So, yeah, I don't know, it's weird. Like I said before, it's a little weird, but okay, we can look past it for right now because they don't do anything quite that dark in this game. The idea behind the first world is that since Kamoshida Man tells everybody that he's the symbol of justice, everybody who lives in the town that he's in just sort of believes him and goes along with him, and anybody who steps out of line and says that they question Kamoshida Man is essentially just seen as an outcast. Pretty much the main theme through all of the worlds is not speaking up against the majority, essentially just going along with whatever the group thinks, and not really being honest about your own true feelings if it goes against the group. At first it's kind of cute, but the fact that it's the point for every single world makes it drill on you a little bit. You know, by the time you hit the end, you'll be begging the game to give you some kind of different moral lesson, because pretty much every single world has the exact same plot, and it's a little bit tedious. I don't want to spoil what the other 3 worlds are, so if I show any more screenshots, I'll keep it to the very first world, and we'll just go from there. As you may have guessed, the list of characters you can build your party with is just absolutely insane this time around. You'll be starting with most of the Persona 5 cast, and that will be the main focus of the game, is just being through the eyes of Joker, and then as the game goes through, you'll just gradually open up more and more characters. Something I'm a little bit frustrated with is the pace at which you unlock new characters. It'll either be like you unlock 1 character or you unlock 6 characters. You know, there's really no balance in between there. It's just you unlock either a huge group of characters or just a single character, and I feel like they could have spread that out a little bit better. Something else you might be a bit worried about is keeping track of all of the characters and how exactly you're going to build your team and switch it up from time to time. I only played through the game on normal, so I can only give you my personal opinion from playing the game on normal, but honestly, as soon as you find your main team, you can pretty much just go through the game as your main team, maybe switch up 1 character every now and again, but for the most part, you really only need to focus on your favorite 5 characters. And the cool thing is, they can be any characters you want. You don't have to play with Joker unless you're playing on the hardest difficulty, and you can switch the characters as often as you want to until you find your perfect team, and then use the sub-persona system to fill in for whatever elements you don't have. Another strategy you could use if you just want to play through a bunch of different characters is just focus on the characters you have the strongest equipment for, and then every time you unlock new equipment, you can just switch out your party members based on what equipment you get. Another focus of the game is a system called special screenings, where you actually have to play with certain party members, so if you are worried about variety, you can keep up the variety in the special screenings and then just get through the main story with your main team. Special screenings are probably where the game shines the brightest, because really the best part of Persona Q2 is seeing the characters from the different games interact with each other, because these are very, very strongly built characters. All of the predictable jokes are here. You'll get Teddy hitting on the main cast, you'll get Kanji and Ryuji getting into a bromance with each other, and you get this absolutely amazing scene between Joker and Yu Narukami. It's beautiful. Let me just let you know right now, okay? You're gonna need a change of underwear when you see it, because it is just mwah. It's the best part of the game, for sure. That being said, though, we do have to get into what is probably my main complaint for the game. The story kind of blows. It is so boring. This might be a little bit unfair of me, but Persona Q had a really, really good story, and the pacing was a lot better. And the Persona Q2 story is really, really bad. It's the kind of thing that, unless you absolutely love the Persona characters, you're probably going to end up skipping a lot of it. All 4 of the labyrinths have the exact same story with different characters. All of them. And there is a reason for it, as you find out at the end of the game, but it doesn't make it any less tedious to actually get through. As I stated before, the characters are so well made that you will get most of your entertainment from watching them interact with each other. There are small things that they do, like in the lobby when you're waiting to choose what you want to do next. You get to see them sort of talk to each other and be kind of friendly with each other. And when you go to the special screenings, you get a lot of dialogue between them. But for the most part, it's so painful to sit through. And I can guess that there are probably a lot of very smug Etrian Odyssey fans who have seen my Etrian Odyssey review watching right now. But kudo, I hear you cry. I thought you loved story in your dungeon crawler games. Now here you are with all this story, and you're complaining about it. Aha! You adorably smug Etrian Odyssey fans. Don't you worry. Papa Kudo's going to hammer this point into your skulls as much as he needs to in order for you to understand it. It has never been my contention that Etrian Odyssey games, or other dungeon crawlers for that matter, need a story in order to be good. My point was that I, personally, find it easier to grind through a dungeon crawler if there is some kind of good story in place. It is possible for dungeon crawlers to have decent stories, as we've seen on multiple occasions, so I personally think it's better if a game can pull off being a good dungeon crawler and having a decent story at the same time. Here, I'll give you one of my patented cake analogies. Here I am at the Etrian Odyssey Cafe with an Etrian Odyssey fan. We order a $50 chocolate cake. The cake part itself is really good, but it doesn't have any frosting. Wow, I say, this cake is really good, though personally I wish it had frosting. Yeah, okay, the Etrian Odyssey fan replies, so you're saying they should have taken out the core of this cake and just filled it with a bunch of frosting. Yeah, no thanks. Why, that's not what I was implying at all, good sir. I was merely stating that I've had a cake just as delicious as this one for the same price or lower at other cafes. But those cakes were beautifully decorated with delicious frosting. Perhaps you've heard of the cake at the Mary Skelter Cafe. If you're looking for something a little more rich, the cake at the Dungeon Travelers 2 Cafe is particularly delicious. Wow, Kudo, so you're saying that a cake cannot be good unless it has frosting. Not true again, I say. In fact, I was just complimenting how delicious I find the cake that we're currently eating. I was merely stating that this cake, despite its steep price tag, has less features than other cakes on the market. In fact, the cake down at the Etrian Odyssey Untold Cafe actually gives you the choice of whether you'd like the frosting or no frosting. Games like that will usually be superior, because they validate their high price tag by giving the user more features and options to choose from, so that if you decide you don't want frosting, you can have it, while I can order the same cake and get mine with frosting. Well, here we are at the Persona Q2 Cafe, Kudo. Go ahead and get your frosted cake. Oh wow, that's hideous. That doesn't look like the picture at all. You know, the cake part is still good, but I don't think I like the frosting on this particular cake. Ha! You admit it, Kudo! Frosting on cake is terrible. Cake should only ever come unfrosted because sometimes the frosting is awful. Well, yeah, the frosting itself wasn't that great this time around, but I at least appreciate having the option. As badly as it turned out, I'm at least glad I got the chance to try it. I would rather have some kind of horribly mangled frosting attempt than just no frosting at all. Huh, whatever, Kudo. You just don't want to admit that you're wrong and I'm right. Thank you for joining me on that very long tangent. I apologize, but it was pretty fun to edit. And Etrian fans, can we finally just come to an understanding? I like story, you don't like story. We can both play the games that we want to, and neither of us are wrong. As for Persona Q2 though, the frosting really just didn't hit the mark for me. If you're a fan of Persona and Etrian Odyssey, I'm still giving this game a worth it price of $40. Despite the story complaints that I have, I do think that the characters are strong enough to carry it for you, and there are enough great interactions between the characters to keep you up and keep you wanting to continue the game, even in times where the story gets a little bit dull. I will stress though that the combat is a really big part of the game, so if you're not a huge fan of the combat system, there's absolutely no shame whatsoever in setting it down to safety mode and just going through and experiencing the story like a visual novel. If you're just a Persona fan, maybe you've gotten into Persona 5 and you really like it, and you're just wondering if this is something you should hop into without having any Etrian knowledge, I'd give this game a worth it price of about $35. I still think you're going to have a lot of fun with the game. I just don't really recommend buying it new. Maybe go on Craigslist or eBay and see if you can find it on sale somewhere. It's just going to be kind of a gamble. Either you're really going to love the battle system or you're really going to dislike the battle system, and it's not really something I would leave to chance. If you're somebody who's into Etrian Odyssey games and you don't know anything about Persona and you don't really have any idea what the backstory is or whatever, but you just want to try out a new Etrian Odyssey game, then I give this game a worth it price of about $25. The characters can still be pretty fun to watch, but I think the lack of difficulty, especially later on in the game, is going to be a bit of a turnoff if Etrian is what you're used to. Though a teeny tiny bit disappointed in how the game turned out, I am still pretty happy with what I played. I'm giving Persona Q2 an above average 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like. Those things really do help us out. If you want to stay up to date on the latest Kudo news, please hit the subscribe button and the bell down below. And finally, leave me your comment down below with your favorite Persona character. I'll be doing something else kind of fun Persona related within this next few days, so I highly recommend staying up to date, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.